In the past 10 years, no country has grown more popular than South Korea. In this video, executive and career coach Celina Lee will share with us some important tips on business communication and deal making, helping Americans and Europeans prepare for business trips to Korea. Hi Celina.
Hi.
Thanks a lot for being here, and thanks for joining and being ready to share with us this amazing experience about Korean and American etiquette and body language.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to share my story with the audience.
So can you tell me please, you grew up in the US or in Korea? How did it happen that you know both culture?
Yeah, so I was actually born in California, and when I was a baby, I think I was like 3 or 4 years old, my parents actually moved to Korea. My dad had a job that kept moving him around, so I was born in California when he was there, and then we as a family moved to Korea when I was a baby. So I was like 3, 4 years old, and then I went to a local elementary school in Korea, just a Korean school. And then when I finished elementary school in 7th grade, we moved back to Southern California. And ever since then, I stayed in the US. So I went to middle school, high school, college, law school, all in the US. But we have a lot of family in Korea. Obviously, all my family's in Korea. So I went back to visit a lot. And then it was really important for my parents to keep up with my language and the culture. So growing up, I read a lot of Korean books, and I kept close ties with Korea and all my relatives. So eventually, after I became a lawyer, I ended up writing a book in Korean and ended up speaking there. And then now built a coaching business not only here, but also in Korea. And now my clients are in many different countries around the world. And obviously, most of them are here in the US, but many of them are also in different parts of Asia. So I guess I've seen both as my own experience. I've been an insider and outside of Korea, and also kind of in the US too. So yeah, I'm excited to share with you about my journey and what I've learned.
So you have clients in Korea and the US.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference in working with people who are Korean and who are Americans? Is there any difference in style of working with these people, in communication?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely in the US, we're more of an independent country, as in like the individual needs and desires. That is like a little bit more important. But I think in Korea, it's more of a collectivist country. Okay. So like the group decision or group harmony, or what other peers or your boss think about you. It's not that it's not important in the US, but I think in Korea, like who you are and your role in the society or in family is a little bit more important than your individual freedom or your creativity or who you want to become as a person. So I've seen that to be a little bit of a difference.
Okay. So if I decide to go to Korea and close any deal or create any new business there, what should I know about body language? Because last year I spent 4 months in Japan, and it's really different as I used to behave. Sure. Because people are bowing all the time, or they don't really look into the eyes. So how should I behave in Korea? Can I look to the eyes, or it's considered to be rude?
I think for the older generation, so like maybe for like my parents' age or my grandparents' age, anyone who was kind of older than you or in a more of a respected authority figure, like a teacher or boss, I think generally like looking too directly into your eyes maybe could have been considered, not very respectful. But I think that's definitely changing for the younger generation. So I do think that it is becoming more similar to the US, where if you're kind of living in the modern world and you're one of the young generation, it is totally acceptable, if not expected, that you make an eye contact. Same as in the US, that it shows a sign of trust. So I think it depends on. I think you have to kind of think about who you're talking to. Is it someone who's like 80 years old and a very, very Korean person? But Korean people are very, I think, generally open-minded and kind towards especially non-Koreans. So I think that they wouldn't necessarily enforce their own rules onto someone who's not Korean. So I think there's a lot of forgiving of mistakes. So,
So if I arrive to Korea and, for example, person with whom I will make business, he will be, let's say, 50 years old guy. Should I look straight to his eyes, or should I more lady style.
Yeah, I think it's okay to look into the eyes. I think 50s are probably, I think, more in the younger, I mean, not necessarily younger, but I think the career definitely is changing. I think for the older generation, it was considered to not be very respectful. But I think for the younger generation, it is definitely changing. Something that might be a little bit different, that may be a surprise to non-Koreans when they arrive there in a business meeting, perhaps, is that a lot of Koreans people think that it's a respectful thing to share business cards as soon as you meet them. Here in the U.S., once we get to know the person and we like them and we want to stay in touch, then we maybe exchange business cards or add each other on LinkedIn. But in Korea, it's like almost a way of introducing myself. So as soon as you meet people in a business setting, a lot of people take out their business card and they exchange it, they put it on the table and things like that. So that might be something that Korean people, not necessarily, they may not know that it's not something that we don't do in a Western country.
Does it have to be in Korean language, the business card, or it may be in English too?
Oh, it may be in English too. I think that they would be delighted if because I've actually gotten those business cards where on one side is English and then the person went through being so thoughtful about creating a Korean version in Korean, and I thought that was a really pleasant surprise. So it gives a positive impression. I think generally when it's like human to human relationship, right? So generally when the people in a foreign country, in Korea, for example, Korea would be a foreign country if you're not from there, and then if they feel like you are very open and respectful of their culture, I think that they would really appreciate it very much. But there's definitely no expectation that you would get it from day one, or the rules even. So I think they'd be very open-minded and forgiving.
So people speak English there, or should I bring my own translator?
I think it depends on who you're talking to. So a lot of the younger people, many of them have studied in the US or maybe other parts of the Western world where they learned English. So it also depends on what neighborhood you're going to be hanging out in, or what kind of company that you're doing business meetings with. I think there's nowadays, more than you used to be, a lot more people speak English. But I don't think that you can expect that everywhere you go, especially for people who are a little bit older. If you go to maybe neighborhoods or companies where not a lot of expats work there, I think generally having a translator would be a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the US, when I go to any business meeting, I can immediately ask any question and we can basically close the deal in 5 minutes. So the decision can be taken immediately. What about Korea? Can we decide everything in the office, or I have to wait for another 1-2 weeks?
I think it depends on the industry you work in, and then the trust and the relationship that you've already built with the person or the team or the company. But I think generally Korea is more of a relationship-based society. So it would be helpful to invest in some time and effort in getting to know them, and then to really forming that human bond that I think will help you to make a business decision quickly. I think generally in one setting, same, I guess more so, I guess US might be a little bit faster. But I think in Korea, it's a very much a relationship-based society. So maybe not going with the expectation that you're gonna walk out with a business deal on the first meeting, right? And then knowing that you want to invest long-term relationship. Because Korean people are very caring and they want to get to know you. And then once they feel like you're a friend, this is why there's a lot of activities after work hours too, because they want to know they want to get to know you as a person and have fun with you, right? So I think generally it's going to take a little bit more time there in Korea, I think.
So I need to plan to arrive to Korea a couple of times, or my first arriving has to be 1-2 weeks to meet a couple of times, right?
Yeah, I think just like any human relationship, the more you spend time with them, because at the end of the day, people want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust, right? So how it's not that kind of a trust, or the relationship is not going to be built overnight. So if you invest in spending some time there and then getting to know them, getting to know what they really want and what is important to them, and then if they feel like this is not just a purely transactional relationship, I really like that person and I care about that person, I feel like that person cares for me, I think it's going to go a long way. And it would probably be the same in America too.
And I think before we started talking about business in Korea, you also mentioned something like in the US, it's okay for us to use just a name, but it's not really normal in Korea to name a person using only a name, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What should I say there?
Yeah. So this is actually something that's very different from the US, is that in Korea, in a business setting, usually people call each other with what is called like 호칭. It's a title, right? So, so I'm a lawyer. So like in Korea, people will call me like Lawyer Lee. Rather than call my name Celina, right? And then if you're a doctor, it would be like Dr. Kim, or something like if you're like teacher Choi or something like that, right? And I think, and I actually thought a lot about this, why this is the case. I think it's because in Korea, your role in the society used to be considered more important than you as an individual. And this actually happens even in families too. So it's very, very interesting where like you're referred as like your title. So even like, let's say like if you're a mom, like rather than people will not call you with your name, they'll be say Celina's mom or so-and-so's dad, right? It's very, very interesting. And then even for like, let's say it's like this kind of a bizarre example, but like my mom will have these friends, and then in Korea, imo means like mom's sister, so auntie, right? But generally it's affectionate to call mom's friends as imo, even though they're not real blood sisters, because they're close, right? And instead of calling them as like their name, we'll call them auntie, and because it would be rude to call them by their name, especially if they're older. We'll say auntie from whatever the neighborhood they live in, things like that. So if you kind of think about it, it's like your place or your role in the society, whether in a personal or professional setting, is your place in the world. So that's why in Korea, like generally when you, people will call you not with your name, but by your job title. This gets kind of confusing. It's not always positive though. So like, let's say you met someone once they were like, relatively junior, right? And then a few years later, you run into them, but they have been promoted. And then you still call them by whatever their last title. It could be considered kind of rude, and it could be upsetting for them. But how do you like keep track of all of that, right? And so like people get kind of attached to a job title, which makes sense because not only, is it like a job, but it's like how people perceive of you, right?
Yeah, it's status.
Status. And then I think this is why even navigating through career change can be even more scary in Korea than it would be in the US. I mean, it's already scary in the US, but it'd be even more scary. So a lot of the companies are not trying to do away with the title, because they have seen that it actually makes the society even more hierarchical. It's already a very hierarchical society. But then like if you have to constantly like refer someone as like someone's job title, then you're reinforced by how they're more senior to you, and then you need to listen to them. That doesn't really foster collaboration or creative, because people who are maybe junior feel like I shouldn't speak up even though I have great ideas because, my boss knows better than I do, right? So a lot of the companies are not trying to get rid of the title. And then some of the companies, especially tech companies, they even try to have everyone use an English name, which is really interesting, right? They all have Korean names, obviously, but it's weird to just call them by Korean name and not a job title. So they'll say, everyone just come up with an English name. We'll just call you with an English name.
It's comfortable.
Yeah, it's more comfortable because people are just used to that. They're okay with calling with the, just by your name. So yeah, it's a very interesting cultural norm that I think some younger people or some companies are realizing it's not really helpful for helping people to be more collaborative or creative or to share their ideas. So they're trying to get rid of it, but I think it's hard because it's deeply ingrained part of the Korean culture. So that's kind of a different something different from the American society.
Do you have any signs with hands or any mimic maybe that is kind of considered to be rude in Korea? For example, I hear like if in Europe and America, we are saying like everything is okay. Then like I hear that maybe in some Asian countries it's like a rude sign or like any other. Do you know something like that?
Like a hand gesture?
Yeah, like any hand gestures.
Oh, got it. Not that I am really aware of in terms of hand gestures. Let me think about this.
Like, I don't know, it's good or like it's bad or like it's okay. All of these signs are they fine in Korea?
I think so, but I think generally, I feel like Americans talk with our hands much more than Korean people.
Okay.
Yeah, generally, I feel like the way that Korean people express, obviously, it's depending on the context and the industry you're in, but I think generally, like, I think Korean people are a little bit more reserved. And then in terms of like, actually, there's something that's it's kind of a funny thing, but in Korea, when you're young, like shaking your hand is considered like bad luck.
Oh.
So yeah, so if you're like sitting at a dinner table and then you shake your hand, shake your legs.
What does it mean shake? Like you mean like this?
Yeah, like if you're just like shaking your leg, right? And then Korean moms or Korean dads will be like, oh, you're losing all your luck. It's considered unlucky. I don't know if they kind of like made that up so that way like you don't shake your
I mean, it's smart to say like that because so many people who are stressed are like, you know what?
Exactly. So like shaking your legs, even probably in a professional setting, is probably not very considered to be good
To be
idea.
honest, it's probably really like that because if you're speaking to someone and shaking your hand, then the person can think like, oh, I don't want really to work with this person. He's like too stressed or like he's
seems
not really confident enough.
Exactly, or like it could be distracting, or it could feel you could feel like that person is anxious. You know, your body language or how you show up, I think, can be a clue to how other people creating a perception of you. So even as a young child, you know, if you're like shaking your leg, like parents will scold you like you're losing all your luck. You're getting you know, if you shake your leg, you're gonna get unlucky. So that, I guess, is one form of body language that Korean people think is not a good thing. It probably wouldn't be a good thing in America, but there's really no, you know, I don't think American parents will say that to their kids.
Nah, they totally don't care.
So that's so those are a little bit kind of like a little bit differences in the Korean culture too. So it's interesting, right? How different cultures have their different societal norms and stories attached to how you should behave or you should not behave. So, and that's why you're the expert in this. So
thank you. I know that Korea is a traditional country. If I want to make a business in Korea and I'm a woman, should I know something like maybe women are not really expected there to make business? Maybe I will be not really respected and honored, I'd say. What should I know about that?
Yeah, I think in some time ago, it was the case where not a lot of women worked, and then used to be the case that a lot of women, once they get married or have babies, many of them, will stop working. It's changed quite a bit over the recent years. So nowadays, a lot of women work and they're, making really meaningful contribution in the workforce. They develop professionally, not only in personally. So you'll see a lot more women who are in high power position. Still, it's, say as is the case in the US, it's not really equal, obviously. But I have noticed that in the last 10, 15, 20 years that, a lot of the women have stayed in the workforce and have, maybe many of them have very senior leadership positions, which is really, really great. It's still not the case. It's 100% equal. Obviously, there are challenges of being a woman everywhere, right? And I myself am one, so I definitely have navigated the challenge myself. So knowing that it is, it's not going to be like everybody's going to be a woman or even like half 50%. I do think that Korean people are generally open to the idea of women in the workforce and many of them in senior leadership positions too. But still to this day, I think predominantly many of them will be men. So there are some things that would be, helpful. A lot of the kind of the business deals are made in like drinking type of situations. Not all the time. And also depends on the kind of industry that you're in, right? So if you're in more of a very conservative or maybe it's like heavily dominated by men type of an industry, There could be some after-hours drinking culture that, as a foreigner, you probably would not be expected to attend. But there may be some invitations, and depending on how you feel, I think that's something that it would be something to think about. So, but when I coach my clients, I would in no way recommend kind of compromising your own values or what makes you feel comfortable to do a business deal, because at the end of the day, it's a human-to-human relationship. So there's other ways to develop meaningful relationship outside of drinking if that's not what you want to do, right?
But they drink a lot of alcohol, right?
Generally, as a country, yes. It's I don't think it's necessarily a positive thing about Korea, but Korean people know how to have fun, and drinking is part of the fun culture.
So it's true that you discuss business in the office, but you exactly take decision in the bar?
I think it depends on obviously on the company and the business deal, right? So, I can't make a generalization that it happens, it's always the case. But I think drinking is almost as an extension of kind of like building relationships, right? And this is just my own thought. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but generally, Korea historically has been a very emotionally suppressed country. Okay. So we went through a lot in terms of like the war, and a lot of there's historical traumas that happen. And then I think at an individual level, like listening to your emotions or expressing yourself or speaking up, like all of those things were not necessarily of the utmost importance. So generally, I think group harmony or collective decision, all of that was much more important. So I think I hope, and I think it is changing for the younger generation and then the young kids who are growing up now. But I think as a country, especially for the older generation, people didn't really know how to like let loose or be emotionally just free. And I feel like drinking played a role where people just felt like I could just be me or, I could say things I really want to say, because an alcohol almost gave them the permission to just be free. And hopefully it's not the case where we need drinking to be happy, or to feel free. So I think historically it's just my guess. That's why drinking was so popular. Because all of a sudden, if you say something that normally would be frowned upon, but you said it when you're drunk, it's like accepted, it's okay, I don't condone this behavior, but I think that's what might have happened.
Yeah, I remember when I was in Japan, and then I understood that after their work, they're going really to the bar, and they drink a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
And then they can say whatever they want to, because next day no one will discuss it. They're like, you can do whatever you want, say whatever you want, we will not take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's like, nice.
Yeah.
Probably it will not work here in the US.
Exactly. I think it would not work in the US. But I think in Korea, historically, I think people needed an outlet, perhaps, where they felt maybe suppressed throughout their day. And there were a lot of things that they wanted to say or wanted to express or who they wanted to become. It wasn't really possible. So I think that maybe drinking was almost an excuse to kind of be free. But I think it's generally changing. I think there's a lot from what I'm hearing is that less people are drinking. Actually, it was interesting. Years ago in Korea, like people, like, drinking and smoking was like a big part of the culture. And one day, the government banned smoking to be seen on television or I think movies still okay. But there was one day, so like all these TV producers, they all had to like remake this, like refilm the scene, because as of the date, you cannot show someone like smoking on national television. And after that, a lot of people stopped smoking. So yeah, it's like they did a whole national campaign because it was obviously really, really bad for your health. I think also drinking I hope it's becoming less part of the culture. I do think that it's changing a lot though. Years ago, it was almost expected after work hours, you go with all of your colleagues to drink. And then so in Korea, there's like something called 2차, 3차. So 1차 is like, it's like you go out to dinner. And then 2차 is like the second alcohol, second like bar, right? And then 3차 is like the third bar. And then fourth is like 4차. Like
a lot of parties.
Yeah, a lot of parties. people know how to party, right? So like that was almost like that you spend a lot more time with your colleagues than you with your family. And then it became like a national problem, and people were really unhappy, and there's all these like mental and physical, consequences. So now I think there's a lot of the companies are not sponsoring like a lot of the after, office hour gatherings, and then that it is not really expected anymore. So I've seen a huge shift in kind of respecting personal boundaries. And then I'm sure it depends on the team and the company you work for, but it's generally not expected that you have to participate in all of it, and then that you could choose. And then some people, like some companies, just got rid of the whole thing, which is actually really surprising, and actually, I think it's a positive change.
True. So a lot of Koreans are spending time in the cafes, restaurants, bars. What is the tip culture? Should I tip there or not? How does it look like?
Yeah, there's actually no tip in
amazing.
Korea. It's amazing. Yeah, it's usually whatever the tip or the tax or all the service charges that we get charged in New York. It's all included. So you won't, unless you go to like a really fancy hotel or something, you'll see like 10% kind of like a service charge on top of what you paid for, but that is more an exception rather than the rule. And then generally for most places there is no tip, but I'm sure if you have an excellent service and then you really feel like the need to tip someone, I'm sure they'll appreciate it very much.
Great.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Because here to pay 20% all the time.
Yes, and tax separately, right? So yeah, it's one good thing about living in New York City is that everywhere you go, you feel like you're getting a good deal.
Yeah. So in New York, you have to basically wear some business clothes. I know in California, people totally don't care about business clothes. What about Korea? How's it there?
Yeah, I think it also, similar to the US, it depends on your industry. So, I used to be a lawyer. So like in the legal industry, it's still a little bit more conservative, and then people expect you to kind of dress up. So if you're working in an industry like that, you probably want to wear a suit or, want to dress up and be more presentable. I think if you work in tech or startup, same thing as here, I think it's very, very casual. So I think it would be important for you to kind of get a feel for how do other people in my industry or dress up, and then maybe even ask before you do a meeting like the kind of person that you're going to meet, and then see if like what is an acceptable standard for dress code and things like that. So
also different.
Also different, depends on the culture, who you're meeting. I mean, culture of the firm, and then the industry too.
Okay, and so I also hear that in Asia sometimes there's also body language that is more like closed, more like for us looks like shy people.
Yeah.
So what is it in Korea? I also hear that you cannot show your shoes, you cannot really sit cross legs. Is it true or not?
Not necessary. So like cross-legged is okay, but perhaps if you're with like a very senior person, who's like a big boss to you, or who's like so much older than you, or some authority figure, it would be considered more respectful to not cross your legs. But people do it all the time. It's not necessarily like frowned upon or things like that. I think the difference between American culture and Korean culture is that people don't really hug as much in Korea.
Okay.
You know how in the US, like we just give each other a hug as a form of just saying hi or bye, right? It's just part of saying hello. But in Korea, it's really not the case. So unless you're really close friends, yes, of course you can hug. But or you're like, you're like someone that is much younger than you, or you could of course hug your nephews or nieces and things like that. But generally in a professional context, if you like met someone for the first time, you would not hug, even when you're saying bye, unless you all of a sudden develop this close relationship with them, So
you also bow, right? You don't give hand for handshake.
So you do handshake if it's kind of like someone at your equal level. So let's say similar age or similar work experience, things like that. But let's say if you're like meeting someone who's like significantly older than you or a lot more senior than you, for a Korean person, you would usually bow.
So I have to bow first if in front of me there is a senior person, right?
Yeah, but they would, if they're respectful people, they would probably bow back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a sign of respect.
And
So-
does it happen at the same time or like one after another?
Yeah,
How
I
does
think
it-
usually at the same time, but let's say if it's already pre-established relationship, and then if the, by the way, this rule probably wouldn't apply to a non-Korean person because they wouldn't really expect you to know these rules. But for Korean people, if there's, let's say like one person is super senior and the other person is like a lot junior, and they already kind of like know each other, usually the junior person will bow, like really like real bow, and then the senior person might not bow as much or just offer a handshake.
So, okay, what is the degree that you, a person needs to bow? Because I hear that there are like different levels. So if the junior person will bow, he will bow like
Sure, yeah.
45 degree or like how?
Yeah, I think
Or 90?
generally, like the more you bow,
Okay.
the more people will think that like, oh, you're someone who's really respectful, right, and know the rules, right? But I think generally, like people are more open to not such a rigid rules anymore. So as long as they think that you're being respectful.
So if I go to Korea, should I give hand for a handshake or bow? How's it better?
I think it's because you're not a Korean person, they wouldn't necessarily expect you to like know that. But I think if you do bow, they'll be very pleasant and surprised, and I think that might leave a really good impression.
Okay.
Because like it's like, oh my God, you know, you studied our culture, and you are open to like, you know, following our own norms of social etiquette. I think people really would welcome that, but there would be no expectation of you to do that.
And you don't really look into the eyes while you're bowing, right? You're looking kind of down.
Yeah, and then you look at them in the eyes, but then you bow, and then as you bow, your eyes will turn towards the floor, right? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think it's generally, you know, if you're a foreigner traveling to Korea and you're thinking about the social norms or the etiquettes, just being open-minded and curious, and then have the desire to be respectful, I think that would go a long way. Like the Korean people, you know, we're very open-minded. So like we wouldn't necessarily think that it's rude because you don't know all the, you know, all the rules. Korean people don't know it when they travel to other countries too, right? But I think if you make an effort to know these things and then you share, oh, by the way, like I heard it's respectful to exchange business card, you know, can I give it to you?
Oh, you do it actually with two hands, right?
Yeah,
Also
usually if
in
it's
there.
like a very formal business meeting, sometimes if you do it with two hands, and then things like that. Oh, actually, another kind of fun thing, if you do decide to go out and, you know, go to a bar or something like that, it's kind of a funny rule, but generally Korean people, you don't pour your own drinks, you do it for each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's possible that you will end up not drinking because no one will give you alcohol?
They will, no, they're paying attention to you. They'll be like, oh my God, your glass is empty. We gotta pour another drink, right? Obviously, like you don't want to be in a position where you're forced to drink if you don't want to. But I don't really drink a lot, so I'll just like participate in the process, but I'll just have a little sip, and then that's totally okay. There's really no, I mean, if you're like in a situation where people are forcing you, you probably don't want to work with them anyway.
So, and you are pouring to everyone? Or just like person who is like at the left or right to you?
Generally, I think, whoever is like, you know, around you.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it doesn't matter the direction.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the direction, but it's just generally considered kind to be. It's like a form of affection or a form of care. Like, oh, like I care about you, and I'm offering a drink to you, and then so I think Korean people would consider it too cold if you're like pouring your own drinks. Okay. Kind of a, you know, it's like a funny culture. I'm sure it's not enforced in every single setting, but generally consider that you shouldn't be pouring your own drinks. Yeah.
Nice. And is there anything what like foreigners are coming to Korea and then maybe they do really often any mistake? Do you know what is the common mistake of foreign people?
Yeah. I think if you're like just arrived, and then generally like if you know how in the US like you smile at a stranger, right? Yeah. And even if you don't know them, you'll never see them again, you know, you run into them at an elevator or something, you smile, right?
You're even saying how are you?
Yeah, exactly. It's generally really not the case in Korea. I'm sure there's the exception to the rule, but generally Korean people don't like smile at a stranger. They might think you're crazy. I don't really know. I think it's Korean people are generally more reserved, at least used to be culturally. So it doesn't mean that we're not warm or kind people. There's a term called 정 in Korean. It means like it's like there's really no direct English translation for it, but it means like a form of emotional attachment or care, affection you show for another person. And then that's why Korean people are like really take care of you, you know, once they get to know you. But so there's that. But then when in a social context to a person you just met, you wouldn't really like randomly smile at a stranger. That would be considered kind of weird to Korean people. Yeah.
Is there something else what you would like to share and give advice to foreigners, like to Americans, to Europeans, who will go to Korea? That they don't forget something?
Yeah, I think generally, you know, if you go with an open mind and stay curious, and then just know that like some of the rules that we're used to in the Western world may not apply in Korea and vice versa, and to you know, go, because I feel like at the end of the day, humans are more similar than we're different. I've been a coach for more than 8 years now, and I've coached people in many different countries around the world. And then at the core, I think humans are more alike than we're different. So there's, rather than going to Korea or another foreign country, it's like, oh my God, they're going to be so different from me. What if I make a mistake? You go in with an intention of, you know, wanting to form a deep human connection. You go with the curiosity of trying to learn a new culture. And at the end of the day, we're more alike than we're different, because we share the commonalities of being human, and to have fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure it was really helpful. And thanks for sharing your experience.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.